Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and technically doing a $30 budget build of the new Dark World Structure deck. So I'm really excited for you guys because this deck is super fun to be able to play because we've just taken 3 of the new Dark World Structure decks and built a deck for you guys. So without further ado, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can come part of our notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name description every single video, getting a signed cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to our Patreon. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of our new boss monster, Rainbow Over King of Dark World. This card is super good for the deck and kind of functions like the old school Grapha. That has the ability you can special summon this card from your graveyard by returning a level 7 or lower Dark World monster that you control back to your hand. The only monsters you actually can't bounce back to your hand to summon out this card is Grapha or itself. But this card also has the ability, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, you can add a level 5 or higher Dark World monster from your deck to your hand, except another copy of this card. Then, if this card was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon a level 4 or lower Dark World monster from your deck or graveyard to either field, which is a pretty good effect. We then play 3 copies of Grapha. Grapha is a really good 3 out of the deck and is still a great combo piece in this deck. This card is a really good effect that you can special summon this card from your graveyard by bouncing one of your Dark World monsters that you control back to your hand, except another copy of itself. And if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, you can target one card that your opponent controls and destroy that target. Then if this card was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you can look at one random card in your opponent's hand. Then if it was a monster, you can special summon it to your field, which is a pretty crazy effect. We then play 2 copies of Silva. Silva is a really good 2-0 in the deck. I really like this card as a 2-0 in this build because it has a great effect. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, you special summon this card. Then if it was discarded to the graveyard from your hand by an opponent's card effect, your opponent places exactly 2 cards from their hand on the bottom of their deck and in the order, which is an extremely powerful effect. We then play 3 copies of Snow. Snow is basically the searcher of the deck and a definite 3 of in the build that if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, and if it's discarded to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you get 2 different effects. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, then you can target one monster in your opponent's graveyard and add a Dark World card from your deck to your hand, then special summon that target, if any, in defense position. But the main effect that we're going to be using on this card is if it's discarded by our effect, we're actually going to get to search a Dark World card, which is a really awesome effect. We then play 3 copies of Genta. Genta is a new card that we just got out of the structure deck, and in my opinion, one of the best cards we've gotten out of the entire structure deck. This card is a really simple effect that you can only special summon it once per turn, but you can discard this card from your hand to the graveyard to add the Gates of the Dark World from your deck to your hand. And if this card becomes banished, while you control a Dark World card, you can special summon this card. So it sets up for your copy of Gates perfectly because you just discard this card to the graveyard, search Gates, activate Gates, banish this card from the graveyard, discard a Fiend, draw a card off of Gates, and then special summon this card to your side of the field, getting you set up for more plays, which is really good. We then play 3 copies of Brow. Brow is basically an upstart goblin if it's discarded, because if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, you get to draw a card, which is a great effect. We then play a single copy of Beige. Beige is a super simple effect that if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, you special summon it back to the field, which can help you get your copy of Grapha or your new Rainbow on your side of the field. We then play a single copy of Pearl. Pearl is a great 1-of in the deck. It's basically a monster reborn if it's discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, which is a great effect just to be able to use this card as a 1-of. I then play a single copy of Cerule to round out the Dark World monsters. This card is really neat. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, you special summon this card to your opponent's side of the field in defense, and if this card is special summoned by a card effect of a Dark World monster which its own effect counts, your opponent discards a card from their hand, which since your opponent controls it, it makes you discard a card which will count to get your Dark World's bonus effects, which is really neat. So that's it for the Dark World monsters. Let's get into the Danger monsters. So for the Danger Monsters, we got quite a few reprints in the structure deck for the Danger Monsters. So we're playing quite a few of them in this deck. And we're going to start off with 3 copies of Danger Bigfoot. Danger Bigfoot is a great 3-of monster in the deck. They can almost count as a boss monster because it comes out at 3,000 attack points. But this card is super good, and all of your Danger Monsters actually share a common effect that you can reveal this card in your hand. Your opponent randomly chooses 1 card from your entire hand, and you discard the chosen card. Then at the discarded card was not the Danger Monster that you revealed, you special summon that Danger Monster from your hand, and if you do, draw a card. Now they all have a unique ability that if they're discarded to the graveyard, they get a unique effect. And this card's unique effect is if this card is discarded, you target 1 face-up card your opponent controls and destroy it, and you can only use that effect of each Danger Monster once per turn. We then play 2 copies of Danger Thunderbird. Danger Thunderbird is a great 2-of in here because it has a really good effect that if this card is discarded, then you get to target a set card that your opponent controls and destroy it, which is a pretty good effect just to be able to pop set cards that your opponent controls. We then play 2 copies of Danger Mothman. I almost played 3 in this particular build, but I ended up with 2 copies of this card, and it has a really good effect that if this card is discarded, you can have both players draw a card and then both players discard a card, which is really good for us to be able to discard our Dark Worlds to the graveyard. And then play a single copy of Danger Tsuchinoko or Danger Noodle. This card is really good as a 1-of in here, and regardless if it's discarded to the graveyard or you reveal it and your opponent doesn't pick it, it special summons itself to your side of the field. But its unique effect is if this card is discarded to the graveyard, you special summon it, which is a great effect for this card to have. But currently it's at 1, so we're just playing a single copy. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing a single copy of Card Destruction. Card Destruction is a powerhouse of a card in this deck because it makes both players discard their entire hands, which makes all of our Dark World monsters' effects go off, which is extremely powerful. We then play a single copy of Charge into a Dark World. This card is basically a monster reborn for the deck. Target a level 4 or lower Fiend monster in your graveyard, special summon it, and then discard a Fiend monster from your hand, which is a great effect for this card to have. We then play a single copy of Dark World Puppetry. Dark World Puppetry is a really good 1-of in the deck, but you only need a single copy of this card. You target up to 3 cards in any player's graveyard and banish them, then discard a Fiend monster from your hand, and then during your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard and then target 1 of your banished Fiend monsters and add it back to your hand, which is a pretty good effect to combo with our new Dark World Fusion spell. We then play a single copy of Dark World Archives. This card is a really neat card, and I really like this card, but I feel like 1 is totally fine because it's searchable off your copy of Snow. But during your main phase, you discard a Dark World monster, and if you do, Dark World monsters you currently control gain attack equal to their level of the discarded monster had in your hand. So for example, if you discard a copy of Graph at a level 8, all of your Dark World monsters gain 800 attack points, but you can only discard a card with this card's effect if you control a Dark World monster. You can't just discard a card and not control Dark World monsters, which is kind of an interesting thing about this card. But it also has a really interesting effect that if a monster whose original type is Fiend is discarded from your hand by a card effect of a Dark World card or an opponent's card effect, even during the damage step, you discard a card and then draw 2 cards, which is a great +1 while also setting up some of your Dark World cards. We then play 2 copies of Dark World Ascension. Dark World Ascension is a crazy powerful fusion spell that helps us go into our new boss monster with a great effect that during the main phase you fusion summon a Fiend fusion monster from your extract by banishing the fusion materials mentioned on it from both your field or graveyard. But if you're going to fusion summon a Dark World monster with this effect, you can also discard monsters as material to activate this card's effect, which is really good because it is going to activate the Dark World monsters that you discard to the graveyard, like your copy of Graph and any of your other Dark World monsters that you're using to summon out the new Graph Dragon Overlord of Dark World. This card also has an effect that you can actually recycle it with, because during your main phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can add this card back to your hand and then discard a Dark World monster, which is a pretty good effect. We then play 3 copies of Dark World Dealing. Dark World Dealing is great in the deck because each player draws a card and then each player discards a card, which will activate all of your Dark World monsters' effects to be able to just get them in the graveyard and discard them so you can get bonus effects off of them, which is really cool. We then play 3 copies of the Gates of the Dark World. This card is the most important card, in my opinion, in the entire deck to get all of our plays rolling. Because all fiend monsters that we control gain 300 attack and defense, and once per turn, you can banish a fiend from your grave, discard a fiend from your hand, and then draw a card, which with the new copy, Genta, this card is just completely broken and a really awesome 3 of. So, that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the extra deck, because we actually don't play any traps in this build. So for the extra deck, we're just going to be playing 3 copies, because that's all we have from the structure deck. 3 copies of Graf Dragon, Overlord of Dark World. We just have 3 extra deck monsters, because that's all we get in the structure deck. But this card is really good, because when your opponent activates a monster effect or a normal spell or trap card, while you have a card in your hand, quick effect, you can activate this effect. The activated effect of your opponent's card becomes your opponent discards a card, which will get you all of the different bonus effects of your Dark World monsters, which is super cool for this card to be able to do. And also with Gates on your side of the field is a 3,500 attack point monster, and it replaces itself if your opponent makes it leave the field with a copy of Graf, which is just really good. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. This deck is super fun to be able to play, and definitely be on the lookout for the full-fledged version of the Dark World deck profile. If you guys haven't checked out the opening, you guys should definitely check that out. But I'm really glad that you guys checked out the $30 budget build, because this deck is super fun to be able to play. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.